Panthers hockey to a T, and the Stars get a leg up on the Winnipeg Jets. Welcome to NHL Wraparound Stanley Cupdate for Monday, May 12th, 2025. Vic and Neil with you, and hey, we lied. We promised Wraparound for today.
Yeah, and but our guest couldn't be here today, so we decided to move it to tomorrow when we could have a good guest and not just the two of us on here.
I think people probably have enough of us the other 6 days of the week, but also that we will be really at the midway point of this second round. We have seen our fair share of controversy, reviewed calls, everything that you could think of that an official has to deal with. And a year ago, we had Dave Jackson, former NHL referee and currently the rules analyst with ESPN. He joined us then. He's going to join us now because there's going to be a lot of things to unpack as the series unfold. Things start to get meaner. The stakes are higher. And it's a really good time to have him.
And you know what? His time on our show might be shorter than the time it took in Dallas last night to figure out whether or not that goal was kicked in, which I saw on the first replay. It wasn't a kicked goal. I don't know why it took Toronto so long, the Toronto NHL office, to say that wasn't a kicking motion.
It wasn't close. I mean, even if a guy's skate guides its way in, there's that pendulum that you look for, and that wasn't there. And ultimately, it was deemed that Connor Hellebuck had a play on the puck, which is why that goal was allowed. But still, it was like 7 or 8 minutes.
Yeah, it seemed like an eternity. It really did. But anyway, it's going to be fun to have Dave Jackson on tomorrow and talk about a lot of things that have happened during the playoffs and things that might happen in the coming weeks in the playoffs.
One of those things that we'll probably touch on took place late in the Florida-Toronto game, and we'll get to that at the end of this recap. The Panthers pull even at 2 games apiece with a 2-0 shutout in Game 4 on Sunday. What I saw at the beginning of Game 4 is really what I expected at the beginning of Game 3, and that was the relentless attack by Florida, big push early, and this was a clinic in terms of Panther hockey for 60 minutes.
Certainly the first half of the game, it was an out-and-out domination. I mean, the shots halfway through the game were 24-9 for the Panthers, and the Leafs couldn't get their offensive game going. They couldn't get all their stars going. They couldn't get shots through to Bobrovsky. So the only place where Toronto in this game did dominate was in faceoffs. Toronto dominated Florida in the faceoff circle. After it was 2-0, I know we'll get to that, but Toronto started to make a push then. Certainly, it was too little too late.
I thought the hitting of this game was relatively even as well. I mean, the numbers were 47-40 in favor of Toronto, and you can interpret that one of two ways. Are they standing up to Florida, or are they chasing the Panthers all night that they have to hit? But I thought that they stood up pretty well, even early in the game. Simon Benoit with an explosive hit on Sam Reinhart and Brad Marchand for the Panthers on Chris Tanev. So the physical play, I thought, cut both ways the entire evening.
No, it did. They were relentless on the Toronto defense, like getting in and hitting them every chance they had, and it was really a good game. I know it was 2-0, but it was a clinic, like you said, of the way the Florida Panthers play, which is basically hard-nosed playoff hockey.
The only reason this wasn't a blowout was because of Leafs goaltender Joseph Woll, and early on made several excellent stops on Everett Rodriguez, Sasha Barkov, and Sam Reinhart, but the Leafs took the first 4 penalties of the game, the fourth of which was a puck over the glass by Oliver Ekman-Larsson. And 7 seconds after Matthew Knies returned to the ice because they were briefly down 2 men, Matt Tkachuk a dart across the ice to Connor Verhaeghe to open the scoring. Great pass.
Yeah, it was. And you could see that he looked and saw that he was there just a second before he got the puck. And as soon as he got the puck, it was one motion right to Verhaeghe and then right into the net. No chance for Joseph Woll on that one.
Just to underscore the dominance of the Panthers in that first period, 15-4 in shots, 30-9 in attempts, 58-29 in attempts after the second, and it wound up 75-54 for the game. But still, it's a one-goal game going into the third period, and Sergei Bobrovsky has to come up big on Matthew Knies early in the third. And then Knies actually had a breakaway at the 6:15 mark, shorthanded. And this was a penalty as a result of an interference call on Ekman Larsson. This was an open ice hit on Evan Rodriguez, which was initially called a major. It was reviewed and then deemed a minor penalty. But Rodriguez feeling some of the ill effects of that, and I think maybe some on the Toronto bench were questioning how badly Rodriguez was hurt, maybe trying to sell it, because he did get an embellishment penalty in Game 2 of that series after getting tangled with Scott Lawton.
Well, if they looked at the iPad on their bench, they would have seen that he wasn't faking, that Ekman Larsson hit him blindsided. He didn't have the puck. It was more than a 2-minute penalty in my book. Like the guy didn't have the puck. Ekman Larsson took him out like he did have the puck and got him in the head. He's going to be reevaluated again today by the Florida Panthers to see if he's okay to participate in Game 5.
We could ask Dave when we speak with him on Tuesday whether or not he thought it was a headshot, because from my seat, I thought he hit him in the chest. It was certainly an interference penalty. It didn't look like Rodriguez hit his head when he went down on the ice either. So I think there's a lot to unpack with this one.
Yeah, I mean, I watch it over again, but I can tell you that last night I thought that he got him in the head, which I found unusual because Ekman Larsson played with Rodriguez last year on the Stanley Cup team. And it's odd that you'd get a guy that was a teammate of another guy giving him a headshot.
Do you really notice who's wearing the uniform, though, at this time of year? And even if you're a friend or a former teammate, that kind of goes by the wayside.
Well, when you're given a dirty headshot like that, like when the play's not even there, I don't think you know who you're doing it with when you do that. I mean, he stood up a guy that didn't have the puck. Yes, I think if you're trying to win puck battles and stuff, you don't know who you're battling against. But you just don't see a red jersey moving towards you. Oh, okay, I'll hit this guy even though he doesn't have the puck. I think you probably knew it was, well, besides that, it's probably somebody that he played with because he played on the team. So most of the guys were on that team. So I'm not saying that he did it because it was Rodriguez or anything. I'm just saying I was surprised that Ekman Larsson, who played on the team last year, would give that dirty of a hit to one of his former teammates.
I'm not taking sides here. It is also possible that Ekman Larsson was anticipating the puck coming to Rodriguez, which ultimately it did not. But he's stepping up and he's making that hit as if the puck's going to be there.
Maybe, but that's a penalty. You can't do that.
No, and it was called and later deemed a minor. But as the Maple Leafs are trying to tie this game, one thing that I was pretty underwhelmed with from their game was their ability or their desire to get pucks deep, chase them down, and try to win the game below the goal line, or at least get the game tied. And on Sam Bennett's insurance goal with 7:51 left, it was William Nylander that, instead of getting the puck deep, turned it over, and as a result, it's a 2-0 game.
Well, and it's not just that, though, because McCabe got caught in. He was rushing to get back. Tanev, his defense partner, pointed for him to take the guy that was on Tanev's left. He didn't take him. He went over, and they both chased the same guy, and both ended up lying on the ice as the puck went into the net by Bennett. So they got all tangled up, as well as the turnover by Nylander. But it was a great goal by Bennett. And I want to say that last time we talked about Florida, I mentioned that Sam Bennett, we didn't see him as much in that last game. In game 3 in Florida, he was certainly noticeable in this game, very noticeable.
I thought the whole second line was, and this is kind of something that we've expected throughout the series, is when is that second line of Verhaeghe, Tkachuk, and Bennett going to have some sort of key offensive contribution? And they certainly did. Now, we'll see what happens because Rodriguez was on the first line. If he cannot play, does Verhaeghe move back up? We'll have to wait and see what the evaluation on Rodriguez is. And some controversy at the end of the game. Max Domi with a completely unnecessary hit on Sasha Barkov, sending him into the boards. A very dangerous play. And I don't think the Panthers need anything, any motivation to get their ire up any more than it already is when they play.
Well, and Ekblad jumped Domi very quickly and really wanted to get to him. You could see the anger in Ekblad. I don't think that Barkov actually knew what had hit him when he got up because he wasn't swinging. He was sort of standing in with the scrum, but it was a dangerous hit. It was an unnecessary hit. It was a message-sending hit, the kind of stuff that his dad would do back in his day. I'll be interested to see what player safety says about this and what repercussions come, and will Domi play in Game 5?
Which will be played in Toronto, 7 o'clock on Wednesday night. Extra day off in between games in this series. In Dallas, the Stars get a 5-2 win in Game 3 to go up 2-1 on their series against the Winnipeg Jets. And similar to Game 3, when the Jets got on the board early with a power play goal, this time it was the Stars, the second of 2 power plays. And 5 seconds after the first penalty had expired, Roope Hintz, a high slot tip of a Mikko Rantanen setup, and we'll be hearing Rantanen's name a little bit more during this recap.
And Hintz placed his stick on a slope perfectly for Rantanen to pass it to, and just allowed that pass to be the tip, and that ended up beating Hellebuck.
Kyle Connor tied the game in the first on a wraparound off a rebound. And after Josh Morrissey had a great opportunity to actually put the Jets ahead on a delayed penalty, Mikael Granlund, Thomas Harley in the high slot, and he beats Connor Hellebuck. Glove side, period ends 2-1 for Dallas.
Here's the way that one worked out. Granlund is trying to go behind the net of Winnipeg and gets tripped, blatantly tripped. As he's down on the ice, chokes up on his stick and passes it out into the slot where it gets to Harley. Harley takes a shot and scores, which nullified the penalty that was coming up. Just a great play, I thought, by Mikael Granlund.
Anything about Hellebuck that you're noticing? I mean, it certainly pucks are beating him up high, and he's so difficult to beat down low, but both of these first 2 goals upstairs.
They are, but he made some good saves as well in this first part of the game, I thought, and looked pretty good to me. And Kyle Connor was out of this world. 6 shots on net in this game. By far had the most. Another interesting thing about this game before we go further, only 3 players on the Stars did not have a shot on net. I found that very interesting. Only 3 playing last night. Beagle, Blackwell, and Labushkin did not have a shot. The shooting was spread out amongst the entire team, the Dallas team. Whereas with Winnipeg, there was about 7 players that didn't have a shot on net. I just found that interesting that Dallas was getting this from all their lines, were contributing last night.
And they only had 26 shots for the game, so that really speaks to your point.
Yeah.
18 skaters, 26 shots.
Well, and for as dominant as Rantanen was in that game, and we're saying it at point-wise, getting the 3 points, he only had 2 shots on net.
Mm-hmm.
Kyle Connor got 6. 6 out of how many did Winnipeg have total?
25.
I mean, yeah. So there you go. There's only 19 other than Kyle Connor.
Winnipeg got this game exactly where they wanted to because Morrissey makes up for his miss earlier in the game with a great move, juking Colin Blackwell and hitting Nito Niederreiter at the bottom of the right wing circle. Sharp angle shot ties the game. Shots are 18-17 Dallas through 2 periods. So for a road game for Winnipeg, you're even in the series, tied going into the third period. That's something Scott Arniel had to like.
You did. And when you're watching the game looked very even at that point. You didn't know who was going to win this game, but the third period changed everything.
So let's go back to where we opened the show when we discussed Dave Jackson coming on with us Tuesday. After a rebound of a Rantanen shot, Alex Petrovic winds up getting credited for the go-ahead goal at the 3:51 mark. And again, I'm confused as to why this took so long for Toronto to unpack with the officials when it was relatively obvious, I think, to both of us, that this goal should have stood.
And it was an official review so that everybody understands. This was Toronto, the war room in Toronto, calling down and saying, hold on, we've got to review this to see if it was a kicking motion. And with Petrovic, it went from one skate to the other to up and into the air, and Hellebuck with his paddle basically knocked it into his own net. And so to me, I didn't even see a kicking motion at all. And I was wondering, and I'm sure that they had the camera on Pete DeBoer a lot, and you could see him saying, come on, let's go. 7 or 8 minutes is an eternity when you're a hockey player and you're used to continuous action and nonstop. It really is. You know that a TV timeout seems like an eternity when you're in the building, right? And all the shovelers come out and all that. So imagine 7 or 8 minutes. That's a long time.
Felt like an NBA game.
Yep.
49 seconds later, you just mentioned that Mikko Rantanen had only 2 shots in the game, but one of them came on a play that underscored his brilliance in these playoffs thus far. He took a pass from Hintz at the top of the right wing circle, demonstrated terrific patience, going through 2 defenders, and then beating Hellebuck from the lower left circle, high blocker, to give the insurance goal at 4-2.
But again, Hellebuck now is moving across the net on his knees and, almost out of position by the time that Rantanen shot the puck. And I looked to see, was he screened? And I don't think he was really that screened. He just couldn't get across far enough. And again, you talk about shoot high on Hellebuck. This was another shot up high. I thought that he was a different goalie in the third period than we'd seen in the first 2 periods.
Rantanen has been in on 15 of the last 17 Stars goals, and Wyatt Johnston put a bow on this game, making it 5-2. But let's go back to Hellebuck for a second, because he is now allowed 4 goals or more in 8 consecutive road playoff starts. He's got a 5.83 goals against average and 827 save percentage. The woes for him and the Jets continue away from the Canada Life Center. But we've put so much emphasis and so much spotlight on Hellebuck. And as a collective unit, the Jets don't look as efficient as they have been the entire regular season.
True, and they're not giving him as much defensive support as they did during the regular season. You know what? You're going to get the spotlight shone on you when you're a goalie. That's it. I mean, Joseph Woll had the spotlight on him. Bobrovsky had the spotlight on him. Ottinger's got the spotlight on him. But when you're Connor Hellebuck, you're going to win your 3rd Vezina trophy. You may win the Hart Trophy as the MVP of the league. Mm-hmm. You got to expect that they want to see that in the playoffs. That people, you're looking for that in the playoffs. You're looking for why Winnipeg has been so dominant. Well, a lot of the reasons been because they got Connor Hellebuck in net. but they're not dominant in the playoffs. And Connor Hellebuck isn't playing like a 3-time Vezina Trophy winner as well.
He's going to have to do it in either Game 4 or Game 6. Otherwise, this President's Trophy winning season for the Winnipeg Jets is going to be over. Game 4 of that series, Tuesday at 8 o'clock. It is a standalone, so they will get the full stage to themselves for that match. Coming up on Monday, pair of games, both on TNT at 7 o'clock. Washington is at Carolina. The Hurricanes lead this series 2-1. And I think this is where Spencer Carberry is going to get his biggest test as the Capitals head coach. Washington has not been very good in this series. They have had some sporadic good minutes, but this is a situation that they're really going to get tested here. If not, they're going to be going home down 3-1. And the question is, can they start with the same push that they had at the beginning of Game 3 and sustain it over the course of 60 minutes?
And capitalize early in the game, which they didn't do. Isn't that funny that I'm using that word with the Washington, capitalize? But they need to get something to show for their efforts that they didn't get in the last game in Carolina. It's going to be a tough go. My prediction is the Hurricanes go back to Washington up 3-1. I don't see it. I don't see Washington winning it, but we'll see if they can change their game.
Well, they're going to have to. And we had spoken about it, that it's all about adjustments, that when you lose, you're the team that's got to change the game. And if I'm Carolina, I'm Rod Brindamore, and we've already said it in this series, so it's not like we're breaking any news here. You're not changing a thing.
No. I mean, you're going to work on a few little tweaks here and there, of course, with individual players and that. But Washington has to get a different game plan against Carolina.
At 9:30, Vegas and Edmonton. Oilers still lead the series 2-1 after the dramatic Riley Smith final second goal in Game 3, which essentially kept the Golden Knights season alive. Stuart Skinner will remain in net for Edmonton. Calvin Pickard not ready to come back yet. By the way, Skinner is 0-3 in this postseason. .536 goals against average, .817 save percentage versus 2.84 goals against and .888 for Pickard. And he allowed 4 goals in only 24 shots in Game 3. Speaking about Skinner.
Yeah, so he's going to have to play a lot better than that, or else Edmonton will be in some trouble.
And what do we say earlier in the playoffs? That there is nothing more maddening than winning 2 games on the road and then giving home ice back because you can't hold serve in your own building.
Yeah, especially for the fans who are coming to see you guys win and you lose them at home. That's going to be tough.
I think something for Chris Knobloch here also is when the Oilers got out to 2-0, they lost a lot of their speed, their energy, and a lot of it was what Vegas was doing to them, and will now be incumbent upon Edmonton to make that adjustment, use their speed, keep pucks in deep, and make Vegas play defense.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. And like we said, and this, I'll say it over again, teams go back to practice on the in-between day off. They make their adjustments if they've lost. The team that's won goes out and talks about how they can make themselves even a little bit better. But the team that lost says, okay, here's why we lost. Here's what we're going to do. And it's a different game usually the next game. So we'll see if that holds true with Game 4.
Vegas captain Mark Stone listed his day today with an upper body injury. During the first period Saturday, he fell and collided with Corey Perry's knee. He did play 3 shifts after that before exiting the game. Played only 5:54 in that first period before departing.
And that'll be a big loss for the Vegas Golden Knights if he doesn't play in Game 4. That's going to be a big one. That you got to think that Edmonton will jump on them with him out of the lineup.
I think they've got to jump on Vegas regardless of whether or not he's on the ice.
No, they do. But when you see a wounded team, you've got to jump on them and not keep them on the mat.
True. Some news, and this has nothing to do with the NHL or the Stanley Cup playoffs, because on Sunday, the longest professional hockey game in women's history was played. It was Game 2 of the semifinal between Montreal and Ottawa in the Professional Women's Hockey League. Catherine Dubois of the Montreal Victory scored at 15:33 of the fourth overtime, passing the old mark set in the Canadian Women's Hockey League in 2018, and that eclipsed the PWHL record set between Montreal and Boston exactly 1 year ago to the day. So a little bit of love on Mother's Day to the PWHL. And now it's time for
This Day in Stanley Cup History.
Thank you, Marv. May 12th, 1986. We've heard so much over the years about the Miracle on Manchester. There have been certainly other monikers that have been given to games. But this game, the Monday Night Miracle, and the show actually is dropping on a Monday, took place in Game 6 of the Campbell Conference Final between the Calgary Flames and the St. Louis Blues. In St. Louis, with the Blues facing elimination, they trailed 4-1 after the second period and 5-2 with 12 minutes left in the third. Brian Sutter got a goal to cut the deficit to 5-3, and then a pair of goals by Greg Puslowski in the final 4 minutes sent the game to overtime. And at the 7:30 mark, Doug Wickenheiser banged home Mark Hunter's rebound to force Game 7. That was a game that the Blues would ultimately lose 2-1. But I also believe, Neil, that game cost the Calgary Flames the Stanley Cup that year, because they had to play that seventh game. It was a very tough game. And probably better than anybody, that you don't want to have to play one more second of Stanley Cup hockey than you have to. You don't want to have to play an extra period, and you certainly don't want to have to play an extra game. And that's what the Flames did.
Yeah, and remember, 86 is the famous year that the Flames knocked out the Oilers, which was unheard of at that particular time in history. The Oilers were by far the most dominant team in the league. They had won the Cup in 84. They had won the Cup in 85. People took it for granted they were going to win in 86, but Calgary knocked them out. And that was a tough series to go through. So you go through that many tough series, and then all of a sudden Montreal doesn't have as many tough series to go through and has a lot of great players and end up winning the Stanley Cup that year.
And to that point, that series with the Oilers went 7. This series with the Blues went 7 when it should have been over in 6. And the residual effect was Calgary won Game 1 against the Canadiens and had a lead in Game 2. But as that game went on, you could see they were gassed. They had nothing in the tank. Canadians wound up winning that game in overtime. Brian Skrudland scored at 9 seconds of the extra period. And then the Canadians won the next 3 and won the Stanley Cup. And I still believe that the Flames lost the Cup in that 6th game to St. Louis in the Campbell Final.
A lot of great names on that Montreal team as young rookies. Chris Chelios, Patrick Waugh, quite a lot of great names. The second last Stanley Cup that the Montreal Canadiens have won in their great illustrious history.
And that will wrap up Stanley Cupdate for Monday, May 12th. Remember, we come back with Wraparound on Tuesday. Special guest, former NHL referee and current rules analyst, Dave Jackson. So we will look forward to speaking with you then.